Hi there, I'm Danny Flexen. Welcome to the latest edition of SecondsOut FLEXpectations. We're here every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. to look ahead into the world of boxing. And this week, I'm going to use a fight tomorrow night more as a jumping off point than anything else. And that's Claressa Shields against Marie-Eve Dicaire, somewhat contentiously on pay-per-view in the US, which will be a test of the popularity of female boxing, I guess. But it's notable historically for being the first time that a fighter of either gender has bid to become a two-weight undisputed world champion in the four-belt era. Claressa Shields has already achieved this up at middleweight, and now she puts two of her titles on the line at super welter against the two belts held by Dicaire in Flint, Michigan, in her hometown. And it will be interesting to see what happens, also how well that fight does on pay-per-view. But it's just notable for the historic association, if nothing else. And the men's game has been has taken a lot longer generally to generate undisputed title fights in the four-belt era, primarily because of the comparative strength in depth in the male side of boxing compared to female. You get to a certain point in female boxing if you stay in the same weight class where you've got no other option really than to become undisputed if you're so much better than the others. Claressa Shields is one example. Katie Taylor is another, especially since we've seen the female amateur game improve so much, be incorporated into the Olympics, and those ladies then turn over and elevate the standing of the professional game. And also, the female boxing doesn't quite have the drawing power of the men's side just yet, and partly because of this, it's important to make the very best female fights. But it does seem that the male side is slowly following suit. We had to wait 12 years between undisputed world title fights until 2017, so from 2005 to then, when we saw Terence Crawford unify all the belts at 140 pounds 3.5 years ago. It doesn't seem like that long ago, but I checked BoxRec earlier and I can tell you it was. But while we've waited all that time for the most recent four-belt unification fight, actually, am I even right about that? I believe Alexander Usyk unified all four major belts at cruiserweight also. So we saw that happen too. But now we could have two male undisputed world title fights within the space of maybe 6 weeks of each other, maybe even closer than that, as it's now been announced that Josh Taylor, who holds two of the major titles at 140 pounds, will clash with Jose Ramirez, who holds the other two, on May 22nd in Las Vegas. Spoke to Josh recently, absolutely buzzing for the fight, can't wait. It's a fight that's been talked about for a long time. Bob Arum obviously works with both guys at Top Rank. The fight will be on ESPN in the US, not so sure about the UK just yet. But incredibly exciting fight, both unbeaten, both in their primes, and vying for all the gold that really matters at 140 pounds. And the winner will be not only the number one beyond doubt in that division, but also a ready-made opponent for the likes of Terence Crawford and Errol Spence up at 147 if they decide to change division after winning that title. Draws aside, we hope there's not a draw, of course. We want a conclusive victor if possible. And then, probably in June or maybe early July, we should see, and Bob Arum, the aforementioned Bob Arum, has said they're just waiting on contracts to be signed. All the major stumbling blocks have now been overcome. We should see Anthony Joshua, who has 3 of the major world titles at heavyweight, against the WBC champion Tyson Fury, who for many people is the consensus leading figure in the division. Again, another fight that's been talked about for years now. Two Brits, both preeminent heavyweights of their era. Fury, of course, unbeaten, had that draw with Deontay Wilder, but that aside, has never lost. Joshua has avenged his only defeat against Andy Ruiz Jr. In comprehensive fashion in their rematch, and both in or around their physical and boxing primes. So that's one that will be the biggest fight, certainly commercially, in British boxing history. The first ever all British undisputed world title fight in the four belt era. It could crown the first British undisputed world champion in the 4-belt era, but that's only if Josh Taylor fails to get the job done against Jose Ramirez, and I make him an early favourite for that one. But yeah, all British world title fights don't come much bigger than that in the heavyweight division. Rivals since the start of Joshua's pro career after winning Olympic gold. Fury obviously had already turned pro at that point. It was a few years into his career, in fact, when Joshua made the move. But Joshua got a world title in a small number of fights, and that first belt obviously against Charles Martin, and then went from there. And it's just an incredibly intriguing clash. You know, Joshua technically very good. We've seen him switch it up. We've seen him be an aggressive gunslinger. We've seen him be a back foot counter puncher. So we know he's adaptable. He's got a great training setup under Rob McCracken up in Sheffield. Mentally, very, very strong and focused. But then you've got Tyson Fury, more of a maverick, enigmatic character, but no one's ever been able to defeat him. Trounced Deontay Wilder in that fight that will live long in the memory. Absolutely dominated him after rising from the canvas twice to secure a draw in their first fight. Fast hands, good footwork, slick, intelligent, and a bit of flair as well. He's not kind of a programmed fighter, if you like. And I'm not saying Joshua is, but he's certainly more orthodox than Fury, who can also switch it while we're talking about orthodox and so on. So that's an incredibly intriguing fight, even more so probably than Taylor against Ramirez, although those guys, you can expect it to be maybe more of an action-packed contest given they're in a much lighter weight class and they're both aggressive operators. It wouldn't surprise me to see Fury or Joshua go on the back foot and try and win with their boxing skills when they meet, although, you know, we all hope for fireworks. But it's just interesting that after not seeing many undisputed clashes in the 4-belt era since the WBO became a major player, we're now seeing them more regularly. And I think part of that is to do with the pandemic. I think a lot of fighters have lost a year of their careers at crucial times. And I think there's less patience to, grow fights and to cultivate the attention and the coverage and so on. And people just want to get on and get secure so we can see these fights before it's too late. And I think it also speaks to the competition, not just within boxing between the different broadcasters, and we're now seeing more working together with broadcasters and promoters, but also outside of traditional boxing. You've got UFC, of course, who've been around for ages, but now Triller on the scene and other companies like them promoting crossover fights involving celebrities, YouTubers and so on. And as we saw from Mike Tyson against Roy Jones Jr., they can achieve big numbers on pay-per-view if it's the right fight, if it appeals to a wide casual demographic, and also if it's priced correctly. So I think that's maybe made some of the boxing promoters sit up and take notice and think, well, let's make our money while we can, rather than leave these fights to kind of grow and make more sense down the line. But what if they never happen? Because of future deals with broadcasters that preclude them, because one of the fighters in question loses and can't come back from it. I think with the Fury-Joshua fight in particular, seeing Joshua lose to Ruiz Jr. probably made a few people sit up and take notice and say, wow, this hope of a huge Joshua-Fury clash could be over in the blink of an eye. One punch, particularly in the heavyweight division, sorry to be cliche, but is all it takes. We saw Joshua avenge that defeat, thankfully, and now him against Fury is very much back on the table, and if we're to believe Bob Arum, almost over the line. So I don't think anyone wants to leave things to settle and risk never seeing those big fights now. I think we're in an era where we want to see them as soon as possible. We want the best fighting the best. That's what people who claim the UFC is gaining ground or has taken over boxing often cite as the reason. The best always fight the best. And they may have a valid point, but if boxing's making an effort to change that by matching the best fighters for the undisputed belts to crown top fighters in each division, I think that's what Ring Magazine did a number of years ago when they started crowning their own champions as well, to kind of have one person known worldwide as the best in that weight class. I think it should be applauded. Now, before I go, I just want to get you guys' feedback on those two fights. So who do you think is going to win? Taylor, Ramirez and Joshua Fury, and how? Let me know, and I will speak to you all soon. I'll be back on Monday at 4:30 p.m. for reflections, and next week Thursday for the next FLEXpectations at the same time. Cheers. See you soon.